Welcome to the Claire and Horatio Daily World Brief, available at claireandhoratio.com. I'm your host, and today is June 8th, 2026. We are jumping right into a very grim situation unfolding in the Pacific this morning.
Right, a really severe natural disaster. A magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck off the coast of Mindanao in the southern Philippines.
Yeah, and the immediate impact is devastating. We're looking at a confirmed death toll of at least 19 people already, plus regional tsunami alerts that went out across the Pacific.
And that's just the start of today's briefing. We're also tracking some really high-stakes European diplomacy regarding Ukraine, which is happening right alongside deliberate strikes on nuclear infrastructure.
Plus, we have a heavily disputed mass hostage rescue in Nigeria to look at some serious political friction and security incidents here in the U.S., and finally, a look at the injury crisis hitting the German national soccer team just days before the World Cup.
But we should really start with the Philippines. That 7.8 quake hit at exactly 07:37 local time today.
Which is right when people are starting their day. The human impact detail in our sources is it's extensive. There are at least 134 people injured across South Cotabato, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, and General Santos.
Right, and General Santos, which people might know as the tuna capital or, Manny Pacquiao's hometown, saw some really localized, severe destruction.
Yeah, I saw the video footage of a commercial Jollibee fast food restaurant there. It was entirely reduced to rubble, and because of that kind of structural failure, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. actually suspended classes across all the affected areas today.
Which was supposed to be the very first day of the school year.
Exactly. And, looking at the devastation, you have to wonder about that official casualty count. 19 dead seems low given the visible destruction.
It does, but the tabulation process itself is this crucial mechanic that often gets misunderstood. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council actually requires a full 24 hours to synthesize all the reports from police, local officials, and relief agencies.
Because if you rely on just the fragmented reporting in those chaotic first few hours, you end up with double counting, right? Or totally missing casualties in isolated areas.
Exactly. So we are waiting on verified data to understand the true scale. And the region's geography really dictates that delay. The Philippines sits right on the ring of fire. So a 7.8 magnitude event fundamentally severs local communication infrastructure.
Like we saw last September with the magnitude 6.9 quake in the Visayas, which eventually killed over 70 people. The delay today is purely about the logistical nightmare of reaching isolated communities when power grids and cell networks are down.
Which is exactly what's happening in Sarangani right now.
You really have to consider the psychological toll here, too. Imagine being a primary school student in Davao Occidental Province today. You survived the initial shock, you're evacuated outside, and our sources note they've had to endure more than 130 aftershocks since this morning.
And some of those aftershocks were up to a 6.7 magnitude themselves.
Right, so you have kids squatting outside while corrugated roof shelters are collapsing nearby. Expecting children to process that level of sustained geological violence is a massive burden on the community.
And that anxiety wasn't just local. Authorities had to issue tsunami warnings for waves up to 1.4 meters along the coasts of the Philippines, Palau, and Indonesia.
Even distant shores like Japan's Okinawa and the Ogasawara Islands registered measurable waves before the alerts were canceled. It just shows how a localized disaster instantly triggers this massive transnational emergency response across the Pacific Basin.
Speaking of transnational stakes, we need to look at the man-made destruction happening in Europe. In London, the E3 leaders, that's UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, they met today with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky.
And they outlined 5 conditions for what they're calling a just and lasting peace. The list includes halting the fighting, securing robust security guarantees, and, this is the contentious one, negotiating from current field positions.
It's a highly calculated shift from the Western playbook we saw last December.
Yeah.
Back then, the U.S. was heavily pushing for a rapid deal. Now, this UK, France, and Germany coalition is trying to establish long-term security guarantees completely outside of NATO.
And they're publicly backing Zelensky's recent open letter calling for direct dialogue with active U.S. and European participation. Though Vladimir Putin has repeatedly rejected that overture.
He has.
Yeah.
And proposing that they negotiate from their current field positions really requires some analytical skepticism.
Absolutely. Because how do you negotiate from current field positions when one side is actively, deliberately striking critical nuclear infrastructure? A Russian drone just partially destroyed a spent nuclear fuel storage building near the Chernobyl plant.
Right. Enerhodom, Ukraine's state-owned nuclear operator, did report that the fire was extinguished and radiation levels remain normal.
But Zelensky still categorized it as a vile attack on critical infrastructure, and honestly, it fundamentally complicates any push to just freeze the conflict where it stands.
Striking anywhere near Chernobyl is this stark escalation. The 1986 disaster there is still the world's worst non-military nuclear catastrophe. So hitting a spent fuel repository, even one with a protective shelter, it weaponizes the historical trauma of the whole continent.
It's about forcing the international community to factor the risk of a massive public health emergency into their diplomacy, right? Essentially holding environmental safety hostage for leverage.
Exactly. And the human cost of this escalation isn't just theoretical. Russian strikes are claiming civilian lives daily, like the 3 people killed recently in a village near Zaporizhia.
It creates such a jarring disconnect. You read the sanitized procedural language of security guarantees being drafted in a London boardroom, and it just contrasts so sharply with the visceral reality on the ground where one side is willing to risk radiological contamination.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com.
So that friction between an official state narrative and the reality on the ground is actually echoing in Nigeria right now, specifically in Borno State.
All right, over the weekend, we saw the release of at least 360 captives from a Boko Haram hideout in the Mandara Mountains.
These were people abducted back in March from the mainly Muslim community of Ngosha right during Ramadan. And the human toll has been devastating. Presidential advisor Daniel Bwala confirmed that 2 infants actually died of exhaustion from the harsh conditions.
It's incredibly tragic, but what's fascinating from a civic perspective is that the circumstances of their release present 2 entirely divergent accounts in our sources.
Yeah, the military's version, delivered by spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Haruna M. Sani, describes this unprecedented intelligence-led night operation. They claim overwhelming combat power under the cover of darkness forced the insurgents to just flee and abandon the hostages.
But then you have the Borno South Youth Initiative, a local civilian organization asserting something completely different. They claim they mediated an unconditional release of 416 people through direct contact with the militants, completely bypassing the military.
Analyzing the incentives there reveals a deep institutional fracture. The Nigerian government is facing intense domestic criticism over systemic insecurity. So, constructing a narrative of a highly kinetic, successful rescue is politically vital for them.
Exactly. But the civilian group's claim of a mediated release fits a very troubling established pattern. Desperate families and intermediaries often negotiate directly with armed groups because they know the state apparatus is too slow or ineffective.
To understand that, we have to look at the economic mechanics of mass abductions in Nigeria today. It's evolved from ideological terrorism, like the 2014 Chibok schoolgirls tragedy, into this brutal fundraising microeconomy.
Right. Splinter groups target remote villages primarily to extract ransom. And even though paying ransom is illegal under Nigerian law, it happens constantly. Families just want their children back alive.
And the international community is trying to help bolster the state's capacity. Earlier this year, a contingent of U.S. soldiers deployed to Nigeria specifically to provide training and intelligence against these overlapping syndicates.
Which just underscores the broader stakes. While getting these 360-plus individuals back alive is the paramount victory, the dispute over how they were freed highlights a profound lack of trust between citizens and their own security forces.
Shifting to institutional friction within the U.S., our political sources are tracking a really striking intersection of volatile rhetoric and physical public safety measures.
Yeah, President Donald Trump abruptly walked out of a 50-minute interview with NBC's Kristen Welker on Meet the Press.
And the setting alone was wild. It was in a rain-hit Wisconsin barn. But the interview derailed over his unsubstantiated claims that both the 2020 election and the ongoing California primary were rigged.
Right, and when Welker pushed for evidence regarding California, a state where delayed results are standard because of their meticulous mail-in ballot verification, Trump just responded, "All I have to do is look, and I listen."
Which obviously doesn't meet traditional media standards for evidence. When Welker pointed that out, he labeled her and the media crooked, told her she was crooked or stupid, and just walked out.
The physical atmosphere really added to the tension. You had heavy rain hitting a metal roof while they debated the foundations of American democracy. And before the walkout, they also clashed over a controversial $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund.
Right. That fund, which has since been dropped, was heavily criticized because it potentially could have compensated individuals prosecuted for the January 6th Capitol riot.
And this kind of intense, volatile rhetoric actually has immediate physical implications for public safety in major cities.
It does. Tonight, President Trump is scheduled to attend Game 3 of the NBA Finals between the Knicks and the Spurs at Madison Square Garden. And New York City officials have implemented incredibly severe security precautions ahead of his arrival.
They've instituted a strict no-bag policy and even forced the cancellation of a massive public watch party outside the arena.
Which proved to be a necessary perimeter given what happened underneath the arena. At Penn Station, this massive transit choke point right below MSG, a Randall stabbing attack left 5 people injured around 19.000 EST.
One person was seriously injured. Law enforcement said the suspect was emotionally disturbed, and Amtrak police quickly apprehended him.
And while that attack seems entirely unconnected to the political event happening above, it illustrates the intense strain placed on urban infrastructure. You have high-level political security protocols colliding with the unpredictable reality of a major transit hub.
Stepping away from civic conflict, the international sports stage has its own high-stakes drama just days ahead of the June 14 World Cup opener.
Germany just secured a 2-1 friendly victory over the United States in Chicago. Kai Havertz and Leroy Sané scored for Germany, and the U.S. got a brilliant volley from Antonee Robinson.
That marks Germany's 9th consecutive win, which on paper signals formidable momentum heading into the tournament.
But that momentum is severely compromised by a sudden medical crisis. Coach Julian Nagelsmann lost his 18-year-old Bayern Munich prodigy, Leonard Karl, to a severe thigh injury during their final training session before the U.S. match.
Right, Karl was providing this fearless, creative spark for them. Now he's withdrawn from the tournament entirely, and RB Leipzig's Hassan Ouedraogo had to replace him under the 24-hour injury replacement rule.
The generational extremes here present a fascinating management challenge. They lose their youngest, most unpredictable offensive weapon, and at the exact same time, they are relying on the durability of a 40-year-old veteran at the other end of the pitch.
You're talking about Manuel Neuer. He was tempted out of international retirement specifically for this tournament, but a calf injury kept him out of both pre-tournament friendlies.
He hasn't played a competitive minute since mid-May. Nagelsmann maintains public confidence that Neuer will start it against Curacao, but building a defensive strategy around a keeper lacking match fitness is a massive structural risk.
Especially when you're simultaneously losing your primary creative conduit in the midfield. Germany has deep talent, but navigating these physical vulnerabilities requires flawless tactical adaptation before the group stage.
It really does. Looking at everything we've covered today, it clearly shows distinct pressures moving in entirely different directions globally.
Yeah, from the literal shifting of the earth, disrupting lives in the Philippines and demanding a transnational response,
To the stark realities of war in Ukraine, where diplomatic frameworks are just struggling to account for the deliberate targeting of nuclear sites.
And we also saw the disputed mechanics of a hostage rescue in Nigeria, highlighting that profound disconnect between the state military and the civilians they're supposed to protect.
Plus the friction in the U.S. between political rhetoric, traditional media standards, and urban security protocols. It all points to the fragility of establishing a shared baseline of facts today.
That's a crucial point. Whether you are waiting on delayed disaster counts in Mindanao or parsing directly conflicting rescue narratives in Borno State.
Or navigating ongoing clashes over election realities in the U.S., agreeing on what is actually happening has become nearly as challenging as managing the crises themselves.
For listeners seeking a slower, more analytical context on these types of complex narratives, Debate Candy remains an excellent resource within our network to explore those underlying debates.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. We invite you to visit clarinhoratio.com for more daily world briefs and our collection of classic audiobooks.